What's going on, everybody? So a major question that I always get is iPhone versus Android. Which one do you prefer? And even though this video isn't necessarily talking about it, Android does some things that are right, iPhone does some things that are right, and I just want to settle that right there. But when I'm doing a video like an Android versus an iPhone video like this, I always want to take out the stipulation of like my bias already towards iOS because an iPhone is my daily driver. So going into this video, like the iPhone 6 Plus versus the Galaxy Note 4, I'm taking away that my iCloud account and my iMessage and all that stuff. I'm looking at it straight as if I don't have a phone yet. And strangely enough, these two phones actually came out the same year and the same month, so September of 2014. Now, in my opinion, the iPhone 6 Plus is definitely built better and feels better in the hand than the Galaxy Note 4, but screen-wise, the Galaxy Note 4 blows the iPhone 6 Plus's screen out of the water. We're comparing a Super AMOLED screen versus an IPS panel, and as you guys know, I always prefer an OLED screen over IPS, and the Galaxy Note 4 actually has a bigger screen too. It's 5.7 inches where the 6 Plus is 5.5 inches, and it's clocked higher 1440p versus the 6 Plus's 1080p. Now the 6 Plus's screen isn't horrible by any means, but the Galaxy Note 4 beats it here by a landslide. Now turning both phones on, you have different versions of software on, completely different. I already talked about this in the beginning of the video. Now on the iPhone 6 Plus, it started off getting iOS 8 and now it's actually upgradable to iOS 11.4. The sad thing is though, with the Galaxy Note 4, it started off with Android 4.4 KitKat and it stopped getting updates at Android Marshmallow, which is 6.0.1. It's kind of sad because I felt like the Note 4 could have easily handled Android 7.0. Why Samsung decided to stop it here, I don't know. The same thing with the Galaxy S6. I felt like it could have lasted longer, but Samsung decided to pull the plug on all those phones, which was super weird. Now, performance on both of these phones is definitely interesting. Now, I want to note that on an iPhone, it doesn't necessarily need to have like major specs and amazing stuff inside of it in order to keep it running. Even if a phone only has like 2 gigs of RAM, it can still like outperform Android phones with like 4 gigabytes of RAM. So I just want to get that out of the way. But on the iPhone 6 Plus, it has the Apple A8 chip, where the Galaxy Note 4 had the Qualcomm Snapdragon 805. The iPhone 6 Plus has a dual-core 1.6 GHz Typhoon ARM processor, whatever. And the Galaxy Note 4, some versions had a quad-core 2.7 GHz processor. Other ones had an octa-core processor. So it really depends. I think the international version had the octa-core processor. Now here's a key thing to remember. The iPhone 6 Plus has 1 gigabyte of RAM, okay, which isn't really even a lot for an iPhone, and the Galaxy Note 4 had 3 gigabytes of RAM. And with me saying all those specs, okay, it's one thing, but for my performance and my usage, I can tell you right now, the Galaxy Note 4 does outperform the iPhone 6 Plus in pretty much every single way I use these two. The iPhone 6 Plus really wasn't too powerful. It looks like it can still handle a lot, but in reality, it cannot, and I'm really actually disappointed with that. Apple really kind of focused more on the body and updating the body versus really honing in and really updating the internals. But an interesting thing though is that with the cameras, the 6 Plus has an 8 megapixel camera, which actually isn't that bad. It does have optical image stabilization, and photos aren't that bad at all. It can shoot 1080p at 60 frames per second and 720p at 240 frames per second. But when you compare it to the Note 4, it had a 16 megapixel camera. It also has OIS, but it can shoot Quad HD video at 30 frames per second and 1080p videos at 60 frames per second. And in my opinion, it was kind of weird because on some photos, the 6 Plus looked better. On other photos, the Note 4 looked better. But as a whole, for my usage and using these two, I can tell you the Note 4 does have a overall better camera. But with that being said, I believe the front camera on the iPhone 6 Plus is better than the Note 4, even though it's clocked lower. It's only 1.2 megapixels versus the Note 4's 3.7 megapixels. But the Note 4 can shoot 1440p videos on the front camera, where the iPhone 6 Plus cannot. But I think overall, the iPhone 6 Plus's front camera is better. The Note 4's back camera is better, so it's kind of a flip-flop. Now, battery life is kind of hard to explain too because the Note 4 has a removable battery. The iPhone 6 Plus does not. But keeping both the phones stock, the 6 Plus has a 2915 mAh battery. The Note 4 has a 3220 mAh battery, and I would probably say the 6 Plus's battery is much better because it isn't necessarily as powerful as the Note 4. And I even had the 6 Plus as a daily driver, and when I was using the Note 4, the battery life on it wasn't too good. My bad, I lost my voice. And that mostly had to do with how powerful the phone is and the gigantic screen that it had to power, and it was clocked to higher resolutions. So in reality, the battery on the 6 Plus is actually better than the Note 4. And that's why it's so important to kind of, dig in a little deeper, because the specs say one thing, but actually using it says another thing. Now, some pros and cons: both phones do have fingerprint sensors. A huge problem with the 6 Plus was that it did have a touch disease problem, and it also bent easily. Now, I had my 6 Plus, it never bent, it never had any of those problems, but I'm not saying it doesn't exist. So if you're planning on getting these phones used because nobody sells them brand new anymore, that is something to consider. And another thing with the Galaxy Note 4 is that since it is an OLED screen, you are kind of in the market for burn-in, especially when you buy a phone used. When I had my Galaxy Note 4, the burn-in was insane, and especially when you're considering this phone came out 4 years ago almost, you should expect getting burn-in on your display on a Note 4 versus IPS panel. It's much harder to get burn-in on an IPS panel versus a OLED panel. So in my opinion, which one should you pick up in 2018? I would say if you're perfectly fine with having burn-in on your display and not really caring too much about a front camera and software updates, the Galaxy Note 4 isn't a bad phone at all. And in some cases, as a whole, I think it is better than the iPhone 6 Plus. You can always root it and ROM it. You can always put in an extra battery, swap in and out. You have removable storage. You can add a micro SD card. So I think overall, I think the Galaxy Note 4 is actually better than the iPhone 6 Plus. But the iPhone 6 Plus isn't that far off either. I mean, it's still getting software updates. It's somewhat powerful. It has a pretty good front camera. The battery life is awesome on it. And I think the biggest thing is, like I said, the first reason, it's still getting software updates, man. This is a 4-year-old phone, almost going on 5 years next year, and it's still getting software updates. That's insane. So in reality, you can't really go wrong with getting either of these phones, but I would definitely recommend getting the Galaxy Note 4 over the iPhone 6 Plus. Like if the Galaxy Note 4 was like 100%, the 6 Plus would have been like 85 or like 90%. And guys, that is pretty much it. If you have any questions or you agree with me or disagree with me, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. We're still giving away an iPhone 6s and an iPhone SE. All you have to do to enter is subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter and Instagram. All those links are down in the description, so it's really easy to answer. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys, and hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.